here's your host, Alex Garrett.
And as promised here on this Sunday edition of Alex Garrett Podcasting, we are going to continue with Nick Lyons. He's 88. He's telling his story of moving out of New York City, moving back into New York City. And of course, it's a book he's written called Fire in the Straw, a memoir, which you can catch all these stories in. Nick, I've got to ask you, you were obviously owning this business and you had this company. Do you feel that the whole roll your sleeves up and get to work and literally start your own business, is that not appreciated / not encouraged enough now? Like, are you sad to see that small businesses aren't growing or there's not really a willingness to be an entrepreneur during this time?
Yeah, I was tremendously excited by the demands that a small company made, where I had been even the executive editor. I had only dealt with editorial matters, and owning a place of my own, I had to develop all new skills. I had to learn how to produce a book, how to market a book. I had no idea how to publicize a book. I hadn't hired anybody. I had to hire the right people. You really do have to roll up your sleeves, and you have it all day long, and you go to sleep with it at night. I was able to stop teaching after 26 years at Hunter and just have the one job. And I put all of my energies into it. I didn't write very much at that time, but
How many people would you say you published in that?
Learned these other skills. Yes, Alex, you go on.
How many people did you publish or help publish within Lyons Press?
I think we did about 10 books a season to begin with, and we built that up to about 60 or 70 a year, and then probably closer to 100 eventually. There were all sorts of books. Some were reprints of older books, something I had a particular fancy for. We found a lot of older books to republish. Some had been done in paperback, but had been left to languish. I picked those up, did them in hardcover, and did very well with them. A lot were new. Since I liked fishing, always been just passionate about it. I started a little list in fly fishing books, and I think it's good if you're a small house to specialize in something. And I guess you have this with your program, that you want to be not just like every other program, but one with a mission. Had as the backbone of my business publishing fly fishing books, and I think there's not much doubt that I was, to be very modest about it, that I was probably the best and the most vigorous publisher of fly fishing books I think that the country has ever had. I did the best books. I did some that were older, some that were new. I launched a great number of new people, and it was very, very exciting. Along with that, I was able to develop from fishing to natural history to writers about it. I published a book by the great novelist Tom McGuane, a new book on his love of horses. That was a wonderful book. Some Horses, it was called. And I did a number of others by very serious writers in another field who wanted to do some specialty book that the big houses didn't want to do. I found the kind of niche that you want when you have a business of your own, things you can do that no one else can do as well.
I love that. I love that word, Nick. Niche. That's I think what we're all trying to do in this world, because everybody's talking about everything, right? So how do we stand out? Now, with the fly fishing, I got to ask this because I'm a sports guy, but did you ever cover like a bass tournament or, a fishing tournament that actually would be televised on ESPN and the like? Did you ever cover those events?
I didn't. But somehow the fly fishing world has a few tournaments, a few very good ones, something called the One Fly, but nothing like the great bass tournaments that are held. where they haul in want to get as many pounds as they can. They're very exciting. They have a lot of money involved and a lot of people. But I was a very competitive basketball player, but somehow the competitive bug didn't rub off to this other person as a fishing person. I don't think going after a live creature, a bird, a fish, or what have you, I don't think it's as good as or as sustainable a pleasure or way to behave as you can if you find other reasons to do it rather than have it as a contest or a competition. I'm not a preacher. There are other people who obviously love the competition, and I don't want to take away anybody's competition, but I couldn't. Somehow the fly fishermen, as I see them, I'm more interested in tying the right fly and getting the right cast under control, fishing in the right places, and that sustains them. They don't want the competition. But,
Nick, I've got to ask you this now. So,
sure.
When people say you say you didn't feel that you were competitive, but I would say keeping it going, writing till at least 88 and beyond, that is competitive. That is not giving up. So I got to ask, people write their memoir, when they want to retire and stuff. Do you feel like you're at the retirement now, or do you feel like there's still so much to write about? Was this the end? Was Fire in the Straw?
That's a good question, Alex. I don't feel competitive in writing. I know that from what I've read about Hemingway, he was enormously competitive about other writers and looked down on them. I sort of go my own way and have enough pleasure in doing it. I do. I have 2 or 3 other books I'd like to write. I was very close to my wife and feel very strongly that I'd like to write something that includes both my grief, my loss, and also the nature of our relationship. 2 very independent people who had an extraordinary 58-year run. I also have gone further than that. Mary died 5 years ago, and I have since then, even in my old age, found a lady friend, and I would very much like to write about her. I'd like to write something called Love After Love, something that mediates between it all. You're not being dishonest in loving someone else. You have that other person who's inside you, and she'll never be there, but always be there. But I very much want to write about finding someone else to give as much of yourself as you can give to, and enjoying the pleasures of companionship and whatever is left of the physical companionship.
Nick,
So I'd got at least those 2. I'd like to write some essays, one on my son Paul, who was a distinguished professor at the University of Hawaii, and with whom I was very close, and contracted melanoma out there. There's become too much sun from exposure to the sun. Had it misdiagnosed and took about 10 years of slowly getting chewed up and then dying. I'd like to write about him and the novels he wrote and the friendship we had. So I have really 3 projects. Taking notes for all 3 of them at once and still working on them.
Well, that is awesome. That is awesome. Nick, do you have social media? Actually, do you have a Twitter or a Facebook, Instagram where people can find your work?
I don't. I have an email. I don't have a website. I don't have any of the social media. The book, Fire in the Straw, has a big write-up on me and the other books I've done on the Amazon. Amazon has a big write-up on it, and a lot of the comments that have come in on it. And I think my wife's website is listed, and through that, anyone can get me through that, or they can get me. I'm listed in the New York phone book. I don't hide, and I'd be delighted to hear from anybody who always by electronic methods rather than the phone, because I like to leave the phone open and not use it that much. I don't like to work and be interrupted too often.
Well, I was going to say, so obviously in the country life, you adjusted to that for, I think you said 20 years or so. But did this pandemic then kind of feel like a second nature to you? Like, okay, we have to stay inside. I've done that kind of in the country life. Were you able to not be so thrown off by this, or did it throw you off as well? Even though you were sort of in a, not a quarantine state, but in a country kind of state where it wasn't out all the time.
Yeah, I'm a bit of an isolato. I've lived a very public life in the publishing world and teaching, but I like being alone. I like to be off by myself. I don't require a lot of company anymore, but I'm pretty old. I'm getting to be quite antique. I think what the pandemic did in my life, Alex, was to scare me out of my boots. I just it seemed to have a target on me. I'm old. I'm a little overweight still. I have some heart issues, and I felt just going out and taking a breath that I was going to get this thing. I have never been scared of anything in my life that I can remember physically. A very aggressive fisherman who would go into deep places in rivers without worrying. But this just spooked me. I was afraid I'd get it, very afraid, and I particularly not only didn't want to die now while I was really writing very well and enjoying my life and enjoying a new companion, but the fact that it was so scary, the way you die. You go into a ventilator for a long time and you can't see anybody, you can't contact them. I think that was the great effect on me. I just became absolutely obsessed with not getting it. And I do think some people are going to get out of the city to get away from the pandemic. And I think, A, they can get it up in the country. And B, they ought to go up there with something to do, other than some real connection to not the belief that gardening is going to change their life, but some sense that they're not going to be bored stiff by doing it for a day. There are people who love to garden, and I love to go to their gardens. But
did the country life teach you? Because it sounds like you were so revved up to write when you were younger, and you wanted all this stuff. Did the country life kind of give you a sense of patience too? Like, okay, I can write all these, but it's going to take time, and I'm accepting of that.
I think what it gave me, was time and simplicity and a simpler life. Gave me some access to rivers, which I had always wanted. I wanted to be closer to them, even if I didn't fish in them. I did not want to deal with. I didn't realize this. I thought I was going to like it, but I did not want to deal with growing anything, not flowers or food. I did not want to tend to the house. I didn't like to mow lawns or the rest of it. And that I think people should be awfully sure they want to do those things. In my case, I had something else that I wanted to do, sit and write books and read. And I really was hungry for that and loved doing it. But the rest of it, I saw people I know people even now up there who, I asked them whether they're doing some gardening, and I say, no, they have gardeners. Or no, they have this and that done. Someone else plows their lawn. They don't plow their driveway in the winter. They don't shovel snow. They don't like the heater to go out. They're worried about a whole bunch of things. And I think some are going to come back and live in apartments and live a simpler life. It's simpler in certain ways, and it doesn't give you certain other freedoms that people like.
Nick, I've got to ask you, you threw out Ernest Hemingway and other writers in this conversation, but who inspired you to be a writer? Who was your, I want to be like so-and-so and get these books out there for people to read?
It's a good question. I started late. And I really don't want to be like anybody else. It sounds fucking smug of me to say it, but I had a dozen or more contemporary writers that I was passionate about. I think starting with some of the older ones, I loved Henry James. I loved Hemingway's work. I liked Faulkner. I liked Fitzgerald. I liked Tom McGuane. Richard Ford. The list goes on and on and on. But I don't want their lives. My life, when I took a hold of it, I pretty much determined I wanted to go my way. And they have disciplined ways of writing. I'm not a disciplined writer. I'm a passionate writer. I had too many years when I couldn't say that I would be free from 7 to 9 in the mornings to write. I grab time whenever I can get it. And as a result, even now, I write when I have something to write. And when I get started, I can sit there forever. I can sit for 10 hours if I have to, and have. So it's, I admire the independence of Hemingway. I dislike the swagger and the meanness. He was genuinely a mean fellow in many ways. I like very much the life that Tom McGuane lives, but they're not my lives. I don't like the social life. I don't even like the literary life. I like my life. I like to go my way, do something that hopefully goes out into the world and find some friends. The fishing writing that I've done has found a lot of friends, and I hope Fire in the Straw, which I've been finding some, will continue to find some. I think it's a book that really registers my belief that you can change, you can build, you can have something that you want. You don't have to live with someone's thumb on your shoulder, and it's a much more personal thing than even a political thing.
Well, I've got to ask you then, because I'm kind of curious. You say you want to live your life, but one of the reviews compared you to another literary, great Horatio Alger, but those comparisons don't really faze you, do they?
Embarrassing to be compared with other writers? No, I don't think so. I'd be delighted to be compared with a dozen writers that I think a lot of, and all for different reasons. I like the courage of George Orwell, who wrote 1984, and a number of other, not only novels, but wonderful essays. I like the directness or the style of some of Hemingway very much, and have learned from it. But I don't know. I like to think that I could be compared to some of the known writers, but I'm different.
Well,
very, very different.
One last question for you.
Not necessarily better.
Well, I love this conversation. I want to have you back as your books continue to get published. But one thing that your fans, your even fly fishing fans, don't know about you that you would be willing to say on this podcast.
I'm sorry, I missed it, Alec. It was blurred.
Sure. Well, one thing that people that follow your writing, that follow you, that know you, may not know about you, though. Like one thing.
I think a lot of the people who only know the fishing which I've done an awful lot of. I wrote a column and I wrote about 8 books on fly fishing, not how to do it, but on other things. I think they don't know that I'm a quiet lover of my family, that I was devoted to my wife, a painter who got too little attention in her life, that a lot of the things that I never wrote about were very important to me. I wanted to be a very good teacher, and I think I was. I wanted to publish good books, and I know that the work that went into those books is books that I published by others, the work that went into finding them and developing a list and surviving as a small publisher, are things they don't know anything about. The thing they don't know mostly about is that for a long period of my life, I had very severe money problems. With 4 children, living in New York, with a painter wife who was spending a certain amount of money on rent and supplies, but not bringing in any. I was financially a nervous wreck, and that they don't know. I don't think I left that out too much.
Well, I'm glad you I guess you say I'm glad that you open up about that, because I've got a question then, because some people say, well, don't become a writer, it's not money lucrative. What do you have to say to that? What do you have to say to those who say, oh, writing is just, you can't make money off of it?
So it's a risk, Alex. It's a risk. You write something, and I used to write for the New York Times a lot. I'd write the substitute sports columns for the fishing writer Nelson Bryant and others, and suddenly the job's not there. The man I was dealing with retired, and the other people don't have any interest in the kind of things I wrote. It's a risk. You depend on certain monies to be there, and if you're a freelancer, a freelance writer, you can be shocked by how little you can make. I think it's the best. One of the best statements is that I know of: don't give up your day job until you're capable of earning it. But in my case, I didn't have any other choice but to keep doing all the jobs I had and to write on top of that. I was determined to write. For the last 20 years, I've virtually supported myself writing, and can. And I have a lot more confidence in it. But at the beginning, it's terrible in most cases. There are some writers like J.K. Rowling and Stephen King and others who have made great fortunes from their writing. And that is always a possibility when you write. And it is equally possible to be a wonderful, good writer and make $10,000 a year selling to small magazines, small literary magazines, perhaps, doing too few. I think that it's the sooner you start and write for schools or write for local newspapers for practically no money, the better. And you discover whether you have not only a great talent, but particularly a commercial talent that will enable you to earn a living at it. They're two very separate things: the living and the commitment to writing well. Writing well is not just a simple thing. There are hundreds of thousands of good writers. It is being, I think, reasonably exceptional to be high enough paid by writing for the New Yorker on a regular basis, so that you can make $100,000-$200,000 a year on your writing. Or in the case of some of the novelists, far more than that. A best-selling author can make more than $1 million a book, and there's a lot of money to be made out there.
One last thing, because we really didn't get into this yet, but as a passionate writer, is the blog sphere helping or hurting the chances for a writer to make it?
I think they're wonderful. I think any kind of blogs, podcasts are wonderful things. Anything that gets connected to communication between somebody and the world. And I think that doing a blog is a way of learning your writing. If you look at it, most people don't grow. I think that's the great problem. They don't remain students of writing, and I think that most of the students are who they read. If they read the best people and the people whose writing can teach them something, they will get better. But I like the thought of writing blogs. I love to write letters. I write hundreds of letters, and I find that I fiddle when I write a letter. I try to do various things with the writing. It's always such a lively and learning experience, and I've learned a lot by writing letters. You don't get paid for them, but they're a great joy. I think other people like them, and it's like a ballet dancer doing training every day. You've got to write all the time, or as much of the time as you can, to be a real writer. There are always people like, I think E.M. Forster once said, he doesn't write a word until he has the whole book in his head. Now, I don't think he lies, but it's almost impossible for me to conceive of that. I mean, that's a level of intelligence and memory that is beyond my comprehension. Other people, like me, have to write all the time. I'd write a blog if I thought anybody would read it. I don't know that I could. And I know friends who do podcasts, and I think they're terrific, either their own writing or interviewing of other people. Several I've recently done. I know it's the case.
Well, listen, Nick, I have loved having you on this podcast. I don't know how many you've done, but I'm certainly glad that you've shared your wisdom with me today, and I'd love to have you back.
Well, I'm here. And I'm a garrulous old man. I still have most of my wits around me, so I'd be delighted to come back. And I was very pleased to be on today. I hope I haven't talked too much. No,
you've opened up, and it's been great to listen to you and your stories. There's just so much I want to cover, and I'd love to have you come back because, my goodness, is the war and everything that you've done. Your story isn't over yet, and I can't wait to be part of this. So that was Nick Lyons. He's an award-winning writer, and he's just written A Fire in the Straw, which you can get on Amazon, and we will definitely have him back. I'm Alex Garrett, always adapting. Stay with us.